Stuff. All right. So far we are in, I'm just going to mute everybody so that we have. So far this is, would you believe, day 3? Isn't it crazy? So we are just kind of today and tomorrow for the bulk of the content. So what we've done so far, just a small recap, is that we've looked at the assessment requirements that we should be doing at the beginning of all anxiety work. So we looked at the depth of process, the stage of process that the client's on. We looked at their levels of psychosomatic unity, their levels of introspection, their levels of metacognition. We looked at their resourcing. We looked at their capacity to be, or their tolerance levels of the physical symptoms, because what we said was all of that really will dictate where you go next. It'll dictate your next intervention. So then we started to talk about, in the same vein, we started to talk about the therapeutic exchange and what the client's presenting issues. And we started to differentiate within the client's presenting issues. We start looking at PTSD, CPTSD. We start looking at all of those and then looking at the more generalized anxiety. And what we were saying is that this model can help with PTSD, but it would require an awful lot more kind of pre-therapeutic work before you would start this process as a way to assess how we treat anxiety effectively. Then we started looking at the threat system in and of itself, the mechanics of the biology of it, the physiology of it, and we honed in particularly on neuroception. And that was the work that we did last night. We really honed in on neuroception and perception and the 3 aspects of neuroception. And we were really looking at that and the functions of the mind that occur or are products of all of these biological symptoms or systems. And hopefully what you got last night was a real look at the internalization. So what it looks like inside the client's world whenever they've got anxiety, whenever the functions of the mind are active, whenever these projection and protection and sourcing and solving thoughts or instructions are happening, and the noise and the difficulty and how overwhelming it can be, and how if we offer interventions at this stage, then we understand that we're probably offering some, plastering interventions, which we're not throwing the baby out of the bathwater, because at some level the client needs some of these interventions, which are fine. But what we were saying, or what I hope that you've got, is that if we want to work at a deeper level, then we understand that to engage with the client at that level is often fruitless, and that we are merely pushed into working with the body first. Now, tell me how that feels, Steve. Does that, just let me know in the chat, I'll keep the chat open. Does that feel like a helpful recap? Does it feel like an accurate one? And are you happy enough for that material thus far? It's a 3 minutes recap of nearly 2.5 hours of presentation. Good. Okay, Chin. Good. I'm delighted. And anybody, any questions around that, or is everybody all right with that? Good. Okay. So that's important in terms of, so hopefully by now we're understanding the components of what it takes for effective treatment. Now, effective treatment, which is interesting, has to be, this is my favorite word at the moment, effective treatment has to be in line with a conscious contract. Now, what does that mean? Armady, you're laughing. Armady, you're rolling her eyes. She's saying, if I hear that word one more time, right? But, some clients might want to come for some regulation tools and that's enough. Some clients might want to come for a deeper understanding. Some clients might want to come for root cause, but every client will have an understanding of what they want out of the therapeutic journey. I'm always saying to our practitioners, just because we can doesn't mean we should. And what does that mean? It means that just because we can go deeper, just because we can access and prepare for access to some deeper material, doesn't mean we should. We do it in conscious contract with the client's wishes, with the client's needs, with the client's understanding of the process. And, you know, this process in and of itself, and I have some people here today, they provide testimony, like, because what I'm about to share with you might sound a bit, it's nothing that you'll have ever heard before. It's evidence that we have gathered. It's incredibly powerful. And so the people that are going to, you know, provide testimony to that are in work and practice state, because this material sounds as if it's an advance in the treatment of anxiety, and it's an advance in a way that it actually really does move the needle. Now, why am I saying that in relation to conscious contracting? Is because when you do this type of work, you are going to, one, like, help your client in such a different way, but also in such a deepening way. And that takes it's an awful lot of responsibility. There's an awful lot of power in it. There's not power as in hierarchy of power in you, but you're consciously working with that, and it's really important. So it's really important for me to frame that as we move under the depths of this work this evening. Is that fair enough? They're saying, show me the good stuff now. What are you talking about? Tell me what it is. So we're going to start that process. So my understanding of working with anxiety is that 90% of the clients that show up are not ready for deepening work. 90% of the clients that show up to practice, 90% of the people that I supervise, their clients show up and they're not ready. They actually work in root cause. And to bring them to root cause will be dangerous. And to bring them to root cause, even in conscious contracting, because the client wants it, would be dangerous. It will be re-traumatizing. And a lot of the clients don't have the capacity or the skill, as we've talked about, to actually deepen and to deepen safely. And so what we'd have to do is begin the building work to allow that deepening safely. And there's another word that I use: safety, safety, safety. Every course that I run is about safety, and the safety of the unconscious material, and the safety of what we call birthing in the process, the birthing of the unconscious material, and having the capacity. So, you know, if 90% of them are showing up, then it makes sense that we as practitioners understand the next intervention if it's not in the mind. We understand that if we're not working with a material that the client's working on, because we understand the confusion and the functions of the mind, what is it that we need to do in the body? And so that's where we begin our work tonight. A lot of the body work that we understand that's in the field is regulation work. Is everybody happy enough for that? A lot of the body-led work is regulation work, really wonderful, powerful work. So, you know, mindfulness that takes our mind away from the symptoms. And I use the word mindfulness with a big, big, big umbrella. You know, regulation work, breathing work, anything else that you can think of out there that's regulation work, body scanning work, anything. You know, name 3 things, all of that wonderful, wonderful stuff that becomes the foundation of the tools that we use. Havening, lovely, all of those lovely regulatory tools. Dorsal vagal toning, humming, singing, all of that stuff that activates the parasympathetic nervous system. All, yes, very brilliant. Vagus nerve stimulation, all of that stuff, they become the toolbox that we use. Gargle and tap, active, yes. These become the tools that we know that activate the parasympathetic nervous system, that disengage the mind, and that help the body come back to some level of regulation. So therefore, creating more capacity in the system. So all of these regulation tools build up awareness, they build up psychoeducation, they build up a tolerance of the symptoms because the client knows that they can regulate back to normal from them. Is that all fair enough? And they're wonderful and they're brilliant. But what we're going to talk about tonight is something different. We're going to talk about a bit of work and a bit of evidence that has shown something different. So what I have come to understand is that the nervous system in and of itself will go off under these higher levels of activation, hypo or hyperarousal, from panic, amygdala hijack, all of that spectrum within the arousal. They will go off in moments of terror, in moments of difficulty, in moments when we're overwhelmed as children, and these moments. But what I have found in the research that I've done is that because we have these long-term relationships, and I'm going to use that word a lot, because we've had these long-term relationships with the physical sensations of anxiety in our body, especially if we've been dealing with this stuff as young children, especially if we've had moments of birthing of this stuff, we tend to have a relationship to the physical symptoms. Now, what does that mean? It means that there is an interplay between the mind and the body that can build the symptoms in the body without there being a real enlivened threat. Let me say that again. What I have come to see in thousands of clinical hours and in myself is that we have this interplay that happens, this mind-body interplay. I'll say body-mind interplay, where the mind has a relationship with each and every physical symptom that exists in the anxiety pattern. And as a result, as human beings, we can tend to put ourselves into a build of symptoms that takes us into those higher hypo or hyperarousal states. Now, I know you're looking at me thinking, well, how does that work? I'm going to show you how it works. I'm going to show you through the case study, right? And then we're going to call on people who are actually working with this material. So with that said, let us begin, right? Now, we're not throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We are not saying that the regulation work doesn't work, because we know it does. We know it creates tolerance. We know it creates awareness. We know it helps, psychoeducation helps. But if we are to deepen, and if the client and conscious contract wants to deepen the root cause, then further work in the body needs done to create the capacity. We need sovereignty. We need agency. We need control, not just regulation. So regulation is a piece of the puzzle, but what I'm talking about here is a different form. It's sovereignty and agency over the physical symptoms of anxiety or panic or disassociation. Now, agency is a different word. Sovereignty is different than regulation. They're two completely different things. One brings a client back after dysregulation, and the other prevents the dysregulation. Okay, how are we doing? I know Thomas is saying, well, let's see how that works. So how are we feeling? How are we feeling about that? Tell me how you're feeling in the chat. Okay. Now, I'm going to explain two principles of it, and then we're going to see it in action. Excited? Good, Armandy. All right. So the first element of this is, we call it maps and patterns, but actually we start with patterns. All right. So we start with the understanding of an anxiety pattern. Okay, so we're going to do a wee bit of this. Do not engage in this if you can actively trigger anxiety in yourself. Okay, so do not engage in this if you still have got an anxiety pattern in you and that you know that somatically you can trigger it. So do not engage in these questions. All right. For those of you that know this stuff, engage. So you know who I'm talking to. You know which guys I know are here that are practitioners. Engage, right? Because I want you to show everybody else, but everybody else, I want you to keep yourself safe. What I came to see was that every single body has anxiety. Not everybody has anxiety, but everybody that has anxiety has a particular unique pattern. That whilst we can all agree on a set of symptoms, and that's what the DSM does, whilst we can agree on a set of symptoms that represent anxiety, what I have come to understand is that the unique way that the way that anxiety shows up inside every single organism is different. So my set of symptoms and your set of symptoms and the next person to be in this group set of symptoms will vary. There may be similarities that we can converse on, that we can agree on, that the science can agree on, but there is a way in which that pattern will show up in your body that's incredibly and totally and utterly unique to you. This is why psychoeducation can only part help, because there is symptoms in the body that is experienced by the client that psychoeducation in and of itself cannot make sense of. What type of symptoms? Hot ears, tingling toes, rushing legs, floppy hands, sweating back of knees. I mean, the list, Tammy is laughing because she has heard it all. Some of the stuff, when you work inside patterns, is absolutely mind-blowing. So that's the first piece. Every single person's anxiety is uniquely different. And when we educate too early, we can block the client from really understanding their own pattern. So really understanding the uniqueness of how their body and their physiology responds to how the threat system shows them that they're in threat, either hypo or hyperarousal. It's so individually unique. Now, why is that important? It's so important because there's an interplay with the mind that we're going to talk about, but it's so important because it's the first step in introspection. Do you remember that thing that we did on the first night, where we talked about being able to differentiate and understand our physical body, being able to be closer to the emotions, to the physiology, to the sensations in our body? Well, when you work with a client's pattern, you're not only bringing awareness to the physical symptoms of anxiety in them, you're also bringing their levels of introspection up. When you bring their levels of introspection up, you bring their stage of process up. When you bring their stage of process up, then you bring a lot of therapeutic capacity and exchange to the relationship. Does that make sense? Just by that one thing, just by that pattern, just by understanding those patterns, you effectively, just by working individually with that pattern, you do that. Now, there's another thing that you do, which is as equally important as building the skill of introspection or introspection. The other thing that you do, which is just for me the most important, you validate a client in a way that they've never been validated before. Because if we're so busy with the evidence, if we're so busy with the science, if we're so busy with the intervention of psychoeducation, That client is never properly heard and can't validate their own internal world. So when you work on the pattern and allow that pattern to be as unique as they are, the validation in that for that client and the unshaming process that happens is mind-blowing. Does that make sense? It's very, very, very simple. It's not rocket science. When I came to see it first, I was absolutely amazed. And then when I started to work with it clinically, and client after client after client, like I love paper. I wish you could see. I write everything on paper. There's paper everywhere, right? I'm not known for my organization skills. I mean, there's paper everywhere. And in the office, there would be paper everywhere with maps and patterns and all of these clients' individual patterns. And you couldn't compare. You couldn't begin to compare, such was the differentiation. And it was mind-blowing to me at the beginning. It was just incredible to see it. Is anybody any questions about that concept of maps? Sorry, patterns. Pattern is the unique way in which anxiety is represented or is experienced in the body. So let's do a wee experiment. Where's your first anxiety symptom? Type it in the chat. Don't type it in the chat if you think that it'll cause you any panic or any hypoarousal. Keep yourself safe. Where in your stomach? Watch the chat, everybody. Stomach, tingly feet. Tammy, I love it. Chest, look at the differentiation. Chest and throat. Stomach, brilliant. What's that, Armandy? Throat. Sweaty hands, love it. Neck, chest, throat. Look, oh, Joe, like warm water running down the backs of my calves. Now, I challenge you to Google warm water running down the backs of my calves as an anxiety symptom, and it'll not be there. But brilliant, Joe. It's my bladder, Ella. I mean, look at the differentiation there. The heat on your face, butterflies in your tummy, fuzziness in the brain, Verdi, a dropping feeling, Ruth. And so the games begin. And I've only just realized this moment. Wonderful, Joe. Yes. When you're given the understanding, then you can begin to process. A hot flash. Fantastic. Can you look through that chat? You see the differentiation. Isn't that just wonderful? And you wouldn't be able to pick that up. And hearing you say has validated you. Yes. And acknowledge it and pay homage to it and say, of course it is. Absolutely, of course it is. And there's the power. And there is the power. I used to have a client that would get it in the back of their neck, and it was like pins and needles. And that's how she knew that was her beginning anxiety symptom. Most people got it in their stomachs or their throats, but she got it in pins and needles. Feeling weak. I have one client who, and you'll be able to tie this on the social anxiety. Redness in the neck, redness in the face is often, and often what happens is the clients where it comes out very physically and they can't hide it will have social anxiety because they're trying to hide the physical symptoms, and it'll feed itself. It's just, yeah, you see that yourself, don't you, Carda? Again. Oh, a client yesterday says she can hear a knocking on the door in her head. Now we're working. Now we're working in the reality. Yeah. There we go. Look, do you see the uniqueness of this? Do you see the way that this is in every single different human being differently? And the celebration of that. Obviously I teach this for a living. Obviously we have a course at the end of this. You can come and join, right? But what's really, really important about this material is, should you not take that course, right? You will not forget this moment. And you will not forget to individualize the pattern of anxiety that arises in your client because you spent this evening with me. Because hopefully the message and then this practical experiential learning that you're seeing will have shown you that to be true. So already you're getting some validation that that is how it works. How are we feeling? No bother, Amy, take care. How are we feeling? Okay. All right, we're ready for the next piece. Yeah, good. Okay, great. Mind blown. Good, Joe. How are we doing on Facebook?
All good, all quiet so far.
All good. Okay, so that's the pattern, right? Did I miss anything out? No, I don't think I did. All right. Anybody that have taught that I miss anything? No? Are we good? Yeah, okay. The key component here is why psychoeducation doesn't kind of help, because sometimes the symptoms aren't the same as the standard anxiety symptoms that are on the science wall. Now, the next part is more mind-blowing than the first part. Okay? So if we have a relationship, because the mind has a relationship with the body, yeah, the mind is aware of what the body is doing, even if it is unconsciously. They both are interconnected. So if we have these physical symptoms and have had these physical symptoms for a while, you can bet your bottom dollar that the mind has given meaning to them. You can bet your bottom dollar that the mind has given meaning. It has made up its mind that this symptom means something. It has interpreted these symptoms in a particular way that is, again, unique to the client. Now, again, this is where psychoeducation is unhelpful. Helpful at times if you can hit the right spot. Not all meaning is I'm going to die. Not all meaning is I'm going to have a heart attack. Not all meaning is that I'm going to lose my mind. They are the generalized meaning terms that are produced for psychoeducation. I can tell you from years of doing this MAPS or pattern, which is the physical symptoms, and the meanings that are extracted are incredibly unique. And they are so individual to the client's own set of circumstances and the client's own life. Now, here is the big ticker. They are so unique to the client's own core threat. So we have this way that the physical symptoms arrive in the body, and we have these meanings that the mind makes. Now, when these physical symptoms and meanings come together, what normally happens is that we see this build of physical symptoms. It is the meaning that creates the build of physical symptoms in the client where there is not shock trauma. Does that make sense? If somebody is going to run behind you in an alleyway, you're not giving anything meaning. Your body's just going to do what it needs to do to get you going, right? But if you're sitting in the house and something happens in your system, you can be sure that there is an unconscious process of physical symptoms and meaning building on each other. I've seen it in thousands of clinical hours and thousands of clients. I'm going to show you. Anybody like a visual representation of it now? Yeah. So what we're going to do now is I'm going to pull up do you remember the client that we were working on? Yeah. Do you remember the case study? Do we need to recap the case study and then pull our maps and patterns up? So if we remember this client, if we remember she was early stage process, stage 3, She had low metacognition, low introspection. She had a threat that was the husband and the loss of connection. We began to understood that maybe it's not really about rejection, it's about the experience of rejection, which is deeper. It's about disconnection. Everybody following me with that? Yeah. And that was really life-threatening there, although she'd no conscious awareness of that. We talked about the fear of the fear. She had complete intolerance of her physical symptoms, right? And we talked about how fearful she was of her own body to the extent her neuroception was picking up her own physical symptoms first thing in the morning. Everybody okay with that? All right. So now we're about to see her actual pattern, map pattern, physical pattern, and the meaning that her mind has given it. And that makes up a map. So now we're about to see her own individual map. So when I pull this up for you, I want you to look at the map and I want you to look at the meaning. So I want you to look at the map, I want you to look at her pattern, her physical symptoms, and I want you to look at the meaning that she has given. All right? And when you're looking at the meaning, I want you to see, in this case, how the generalized psychoeducation would have never have done anything for her. And it's the reason why she was never able to actually face her physical symptoms. I'm going to give you a few seconds just to read it, and then I'm going to talk you through it. Is that all right? Everybody all right? Now, stomach. She has flutters in her stomach. Her response to those flutters is, oh, Jesus Christ. Here we go. I don't want this. So her feeling and response to her stomach flutters is fear. Her stomach flutters come from her neuroception, come from her perception, because she's out in real life and looks across at him, and she's reading his nervous system, or she's reading his discontent or his unhappiness. Her body warns her of the threat. The threat is not imminent. It's not real. It's not happening. He hasn't said, I'm leaving you. He just looks grumpy. To her nervous system, this is a huge threat. So it warns her. And it warns her in the most basic way. Her first level of warning is in her stomach. It's butterflies. Her interpretation is now, oh, Jesus Christ, help me. She's now fearful. What does fear do to the symptom of the stomach? Now we're putting more, think about the endocrine system. Now we're putting more fear, more emotion into the body simply because of that interpretation. So our heart starts to beat faster, as you would expect when there's more fear in the system. Her reading of that heart beating faster is there is something wrong with me. It's to shame herself. So we've shame and wrongness. Now, why would there, in this case, why would there something wrong with me be such a threat to that client? If her interpretation of this heart is there's something wrong with me, Why would that be such a threat? Let me know in the chat. Can see the there. Makes her feel powerless. But what does it also do? It makes the reality of being dumped, it makes the reality of rejection seem more real. There's something wrong with her, then the reality of rejection is getting stronger. And all of these physical symptoms, yes, she's preparing for the loss. So there's something wrong with me in her interpretation. Yes, Meredith, there's something wrong with me. There's something wrong with this heart. There's something wrong with these symptoms. This is a really important, powerful meaning. Because for this client at this time, these physical symptoms mean if there's something wrong with her, loss is imminent. If loss is imminent, then she's going to build to the next physical symptom. This anxiety, this fear is going to start keeping building in the system. So now she, in the with her heart, her heat, she's getting heat, she's sitting sweating. Now she's absolutely broken. There is, not just is there something wrong with me, there's something irretrievably wrong. And therefore I'm not lovable in these states. So the meaning that she has given to the physical symptoms in her body confirm how unlovable she is. Are we starting? Yes, it reinforces her belief she's unlovable. The physical symptoms, Juliet, brilliant. Her physical symptoms and the meaning that she gives those physical symptoms reinforce her belief of unlovable. You wouldn't believe what this looks like in clients. See clients who feel stupid, or clients who feel like they're afraid of humiliation, or clients who are afraid of being ridiculed. You want to see the way that the meaning that they give to the physical symptoms is linked to the core issue of stupid or ridicule. Because what we tend to do is make meaning inside our own frame of reference about our own internalized experience. I mean, it's genius, but by Christ, is it a way to lock you into something? So there's something, I am unlovable, and it's just, and if they see this in me, if anybody sees this heat, if anybody sees this sweating, if anybody sees this, then it'll just be confirmed. The source of the meaning, yes, I love that, Jan. It's an internal frame of reference, so it can come from many sources. Sometimes it will come from stuff that we've been interjected on us, and sometimes it comes from a lot of the times, as you can see here, it comes from our own internalized experience. And everybody's meaning is so unique to their own inner world. And you can see from that, yeah, that she goes into hijack, and then she goes into panic. She's hopeless now at this stage. There's no way out. This is how it is. I'm losing control. And who wants anybody that can lose control? That's her thinking. Are we understanding why her neuroception's watching her body? Are you understanding why she wakes up in the morning and worries about her body, worries about what her body will do, worries about what can be triggered in it? Because if that stomach gets triggered, here's what she knows. She knows she's going to the fullness of that and she can't control it. Now she can regulate it and she can come back from it and she can understand it. And that's much better than it had been 6 months ago when she had no regulation tools or no psychoeducation. But she's waking up in the morning and her neuroception is still petrified by her body. Is that client going to deepen? Is that client going to work in anything deeper than their current issue, their current problem? And that's a hope in hell. Is that client going to be able to give her best in the therapeutic process? Not a hope in hell, because she'll even be afraid to explain her symptoms to you in case you confirm that she is broken. She'll be petrified to do any of this body work. And this would have to be done really, really, really tentatively. So this is what a map looks like. This is what an anxiety map looks like. Shame is crippling, Joe. You're 100% right. And do you see why in this case, we would not expect nor should expect a client to deepen anywhere other than just be in the most difficult part of her current life, which is this maps and patterns. This is probably the work that you do, Tammy, so well. You work with the now really strongly in order to create regulation. There's no other deepening work that can be done here. Such is the level of threat of the body, and such is the level of the threat inside her internalized system. How are you feeling about this? How does it feel to you as you see it? Is it making sense? Do you see it in your clients? Do you know it in your client base, but have never had it structured like this? So the client would attribute those interpretations to the stage of the symptoms. I'm not really sure what that means, but I'm happy to be good. I'm happy for you to let me know again in the chat and we'll see. Yes. I'm sorry, I don't know your first name. It's DM D March. I don't know your first name. Diane. Thank you, Diane. Diane, yes, you've seen it you've experienced it on yourself, of course. Yes, Helen. So she doesn't trust her body because her body is going to lead her to be left. And now she doesn't trust her partner. So, you can see why this client's world gets smaller and smaller and smaller. You can see why basic ed. So what we'll do here. Brilliant, Sadie, brilliant. Yeah. So let's take the generalized psychoeducation around the heart. The heart is just beating fast in order to push oxygen around and to ensure to get you ready. It's an old system to get you ready to take action. So when you're in that fight or flight, it needs cortisol, it needs epinephrine, it needs to get you to take action. Is that any good to her? No, there's nothing wrong with me. I promise you there's nothing wrong with me. That's all that's happening. Does that meet that in any form or fashion? Does that meet that interpretation? Not even slightly. But here's the point. When we start to pull out the meaning as it pertains to the client's own, again, specific and individual world, we can work with that. Now we can bring psychoeducation to what there's something wrong with me. Now we can bring psychoeducation to I'm unlovable and broken. Now we can bring psychoeducation to I'm broken and this is my life. But we can bring it in a way that fits the client's frame of reference. Not generalized psychology information that doesn't fit the client's frame of reference. Does that make sense? Now, why is that important? It's important because we can start to break down these interpretations. We can start to change. We can start to intervene. This is your first intervention. Your first intervention is the physical pattern. The second intervention is extracting the meaning. And your third intervention is changing the meaning so we stop the build. If you stop that build in that client, what would that look like to her? If that client got a funny stomach because she realized that her neuroception or her perception of loss just went off, what would that do to her? And that's it. And if that's the only feeling that she gets, what would that change in her world? It's the beginning, isn't it, Kim? This is where sovereignty and agency looks like. This is where true education, true psychoeducation inside the client's frame of reference, according to the client. Yeah. That's right, Joe. It's why psychoeducation can land like a lead balloon, while the client can nod and look at you and go, and do you think that matters to me? Doesn't matter one bit to me because it's not the meaning that I have towards these physical symptoms. Now, if we start to work with a client's internalized meaning in relation to their own inner world, we can start to shift this stuff. Then we're working on real interventions. Yeah. Now, Helen. Helen's ahead of the game. Helen said, as you explore her framework of meaning, it is likely that you'll track back to earlier experience. And where do you think this is? Now you both of you have some view here on what the real issue is. Why she's afraid of the loss, why she's afraid of the rejection. That client wouldn't be able to explore that without the freedom of just being able to feel anxiety in her stomach. She wouldn't have the capacity, because look at the action that's around. How do you have the capacity to deepen in the unlovable emotionally from an introspection point of view, when all of that noise, all of that experience, panic, hijack, you've lost, at this stage, you've lost. I mean, you can't even think rationally. There is no metacognition. The only metacognition is the experience of the threat. So if that's the experience of the client internally, can we see why it's virtually impossible for that client to begin any deep therapeutic work without sovereignty and agency, without this break in the pattern? And then we can start to explore, you know, I'm unlovable, I'm broke, where that came from. And I will add to this, the core belief of being unlovable isn't that in and of itself, it's the experience. And we'll come to that tomorrow night. It's the experience of being, the internalized experience of being lovable. It's one step below the belief. There's much more detail in that. Now, this is why maps and patterns are a game changer. They're a fundamental game changer, because at this stage, right, what you have done is that you have increased the client's introspection. You've increased the client's metacognition by extracting meaning, working a meaning. You have increased the client's levels of stage of process, because now they see the detail of what's inside. Now this isn't about him, now this is about her. Now this isn't about what he's causing, now this is about, here this is, and here to my body. Now the levels of stage of process have gone up. Psychoeducation has kicked in. Now, just by these two processes, we've created sovereignty, we've created agency, we've created metacognition. Is this a process that happens overnight? Hell no. Might this take you 6, 8, 10 weeks? Yes. But it's the best 6 and 10 weeks you'll ever spend, rather than kicking cans in a therapeutic process that you can't work, you can't deepen, or that you're putting plasters on. Now the client has a decision, a conscious contracting decision. That client could get regulation of her system in the changing of the meaning. We call it the break. We call it the break pattern. Yeah. And we can deduce from a pattern the core issue, and we can stop this from working in the individualized meaning and applying proper interventions here. We can change how the client's experience of their body. So if we do that with that client, right, and she then becomes sovereign, she then becomes she's not going to feel anxiety, because the core issue has never been dealt with. So she's still going to be triggered by the husband. She's still going to be triggered by the loss. That's still going to trigger, but it's not going to build. So it's going to trigger at a level that she understands and she can stay in control of, but it's not going to build. Yeah? Is everybody with me? She might decide, I'm out of here. Thank you very much. I'm not contracting and beyond this. She might decide, I can see what my issue is, but I don't really want to deepen into that. Not now. I've just gained control over my body. I've just gained peace in the morning. I get that I'm triggered. I know why I'm triggered. and I know it's much deeper than him, but I'm not ready. And she might consciously or might consciously end the contract there, with the view of knowing that there's more work to do. Now that's a place of empowerment, because that's the client choosing. A lot of clients, when they get to this stage, say, oh, I'm going to the business. I haven't got this far, they're going to get this far, take me to the right, and they'll consciously contract to get rid of unlovable. But some clients will say, you know, because it might take them 6 months work here, depending on their stage of process, they might then decide, listen, I'm out of here, I'm good. I might come back in 6 months when I have enough money, when I have enough process, when I have enough space. But isn't that much better than a client thinking that they've found a cure because they've only found a cure to some intervention or to some level of mind that doesn't really do anything? Client now is aware of what the core issue is, aware and can be sovereign and agency and have agency over their own healing. Does that make sense? How's that feeling, Dee? No bother, Ella, take care. How does that feel, Dee? And how are we doing on Facebook?
All good on Facebook too.
All right, thank you. Thank you, my dear. How are you feeling about that? Silence in the rooms. Good, Sadie, thank you. Okay, was it helpful to you? Okay, Verity, thank you. Would you build a visual map? Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. Tammy, do you build visual maps? Okay. Shout away.
Yeah, I was thinking when you were doing it, I get my whiteboard up and I write it down and do arrows, and it really helps when they can see it. It really helps. So yeah.
Brilliant. And your experience of this, Tammy, as a coach, and Billy, I'll bring you on now. So your experience of this is what? Your experience of maps and patterns from you were taught it. What happens for your clients?
Oh my God, I love it. Like I'll be up there shouting it from the rooftops with you. It's just a massive game changer. I use it from clients from the age of 13 to 70 so far, and every single one of them has got it, you know, because it sounds stupid, like, let me help you understand your anxiety. They're like, I live my anxiety every day. But when they can see it and they can make sense of it, you know, I don't know about you guys, but the most thing I hear is, oh, I'm anxious, but I don't know why, or it's stupid, you know, and then that reinforces the fact that they're nuts, or, you know, they're crazy. So when they can actually see it, this leads to that, it means that for you, and it all leads down to root cause. They're like, oh my God. And it's just a massive weight off their shoulders, isn't it? So then you're taking off one of them layers of you're stupid or you're nuts or you're crazy, because they can see the reason why.
Yeah. And also to be conscious, you know, sorry, I should have spotlight. Let me see. Hold on. So also when you bring what is unconscious under the conscious awareness, the relief of that for all, I can only talk about my own, I mean, and how, we've talked about this before, but even the guys that are young, how do they manage the interpretations?
It's brilliant for them. I work with a lot of teenagers, and what I find is the parents are trying really hard to help them with grounding techniques. Yeah, and you can find stuff like that off the internet, but they're using it at the wrong time. They're using it when they're in full-blown panic. So yeah, right down the end of that map, you know, they're using it right down the end there. So of course it's not going to work. All you want then is to just be, you know, either held tight or, you know, told that you're all right, you're not going to die, whatever. So for the teenagers, they then can use their tools right at the top of their pattern, and that's what I teach them at the beginning. Once, you know, we've learned it, that's when you need to use it. We go through, you know, when are you more in control? And they're like, well, then. And I'm like, yeah, so that's when you need to put in those tools and everything. And, I tell the parents, with the children's permission, can we share this with your parents? They're like, yeah, because they just want to be feeling better.
Yeah.
So I'm like, this is their pattern. This is when you can start supporting them right at the top, because the parents don't know. They don't know what other people are feeling inside. So yeah, it gives them the ability to use those tools that they probably know at the appropriate time, so then they actually work.
That's a great point, but because it allows regulation to kick in quicker, it allows grounding because their client isn't losing themselves to the interpretations which are unconscious.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
But
so
you can also, sorry.
Go on ahead, it's all right.
You can also give them like really specific tools, not these generic stuff that you can find off the internet. So I had one client, and she went through, and one of the things that she found out was calling herself a certain name, which for other people would be maybe derogatory, if that's the right word to say. But for her, it meant, the meaning. So it meant, empowerment. It meant that she was loved and all this. You would never find something like that off the internet, would you? But because we'd done her pattern, it was like, yep, so that was her break point, and that was the tool that she used. She went from not being able to drive to being able to drive. She could cross over bridges. She could, all this from that one little thing that she told herself at the right time.
Brilliant. And that's about the individuality of the pattern. Yeah. That's about the meaning that we make. It's such a simple concept, but it's so powerful. And it flies in the face of all of the information that's out there about the nervous system. And I'm not saying that the nervous system doesn't go off on its own, especially whenever we're in high alert or we're being attacked or we're being threatened. There's no time for meaning in those sets. So I want to be very careful that, if there's domestic violence in a house, that we don't start maps and bloody patterns when somebody's being battered, because that will be inappropriate. But what we could look at that in relation to how she experiences her body and what her relationship is with her body, rather than what happens in the moment whenever she's been attacked. They're two different. Does that make sense? So you can still use it for those examples, but not just because of the moment, because we know the nervous system does its job. And it does its job very well. So that's important to say. Brilliant, Tammy. So have you ever seen two maps the same?
No, like you say, you can see the same symptoms reoccurring, but not in the same order, and definitely not with the same meanings.
Incredible. Thank you. Thanks. Anything else you want to add? You all right? Is that fair enough? You okay?
I'm okay, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else? Thank you.
Can I put it from the therapist point of view? So we talk a lot like the benefit for the client, don't we? But the benefit from me, for my business, loads of confidence, like so much more confidence to have a process to follow. I like rules, I like structure, I like processes. And that's what your course gave me in buckets, to follow the process.
Yeah. And I think when we've structure, we've more confidence in ourselves and more able to meet the client where they're at. Lovely. Thank you, Tammy. Thank you, my love. Thank you. And there's another doll here. Belly. Belly is one of our clearing specialists, and she would, no bother at all, Margaret. Take care. Take care. Take care. Take care. Your experience with it. Belly, can I ask you a personal
Sure, of course.
Can I ask you a personal question? Because Billy and I have a history therapeutically. So Billy and I did this. So she's trained as a therapist, and she's a person-centered therapist by trade, and came to see me whilst working as a person-centered therapist. And we did this work. What was your experience of maps and patterns? Because I don't know if I did it visually with you. I just did it with you in conversation, didn't I?
Yeah, you did, and you did lots about wrapping. I know that's something you probably haven't looked at in this training, but I remember you writing lots of things on paper and going, and look, you're wrapping it with this, and I thought you were nuts. I was like, what's she doing? But it made sense. But yeah, I was a person-centered therapist and counselor, but I had anxiety myself. So I had that thing that therapists have where we feel like phonies because we think we're supposed to be really perfect to help people. And that was a real struggle for me. I mean, I had a supervisor say to me once, "Oh, I think you just have stage fright. You just have to live with it." Like I was having stage fright with my clients. So I think with you like that, I had considered myself someone who was self-aware, but actually I had no awareness about my anxiety at all. And that's what this opens up. People present with that idea, like me. At one point I was like, Diet Coke gives me anxiety. My mother gives me anxiety. And you shrink your world because it's activated in so many different places or with so many different people. And I think it just, that awareness of what is happening for me. So, you know, when people are saying like, do you create the visual diagram? I always encourage clients just to make notes in their phone as we start to open this process. What do you start to notice in your body?
Yeah.
The heart, the tummy. What do you tell yourself? Because I would have said to Shauna, like all of our clients say to us, I thought you were barking mad. I was like, I go from 1 to 1,000 in 2 seconds. That's what everyone tells you. But it's not true. We don't. There's a process. It starts
I love
somewhere.
that. Stop there, we say.
Yeah.
We think we go from 1 to 100 in 2 seconds, but we actually don't. There's a process, an internalized process that's going unnoticed, unconscious. And when we slow that down, we slow down going from 1 to 2 and 2 to 3 rather than going to 1 to 100. I love that, Bally. I think that's so perfectly said. Thank you for that. Because I think you would represent a higher stage of client. The case study represented a lower stage of client. You represent a higher stage of client. So who is unaware, but not aware of the physical pattern of their anxiety, because they're two different things, aren't they?
Totally. And even to be told there might be a pattern is a bit bizarre. But what's great is it's actually a prescriptive way of treating this condition of anxiety. It's like going into the doctor and them saying to you, this dermatitis can be gone with a steroid cream. Oh my God, wow. For so long, even my previous CBT therapist had said to me, you know, you can't have two thoughts at the same time. So it's nearly like that positive affirmation. You know, you're feeling shit, but I feel great. I feel great. Oh, I still feel shit. It just doesn't work. It doesn't fit. So really with this, it's that idea, what's happening in your body? What are you telling yourself about that symptom? And I remember talking to you about being so terrified. I don't like small spaces, but on an airplane, but you were always kind of poking and pushing at why. Once we got the body calmed, the actual outcome was madness, loss of love and connection, like going crazy on the plane, screaming, having to be restrained or taser gunned and losing everything. And, you know, it's always connected to that experience in trauma as a child. We don't want to relive that ever again. So anxiety is just on a loop. Don't go there. Don't go there. That triggered that.
Wonderful. So there you are explaining through your own personal example of, you know, having this pattern that you weren't aware of, having this meaning that you hadn't a clue, you just felt you went from 1 to 100, breaking that down. And then when you break that down, seeing where the root cause of this is, because the root cause of this wasn't that trauma experience that you had as a child that you were trying to keep yourself away from for the rest of your days. And there it is. And there's maps and patterns. Literally, Wendy's just as great expert. I love that. You know, I can teach and teach and teach, but when you have like you and Tammy that bring your own perspective, it's just so fruitful and helpful.
Yeah, it's great. And it's really tough. You know, I always say to therapists, like, it's not a quick fix. And even some therapists will come and they don't have any tolerance for the feelings in the body. And that's where I do say, look, vagus nerve, you know, here in Donegal, they're big into the sea swimming. I think they're so brave, and it does stimulate that. You know, you could be up to 90 and you go for a cold swim and it's, whoa, you feel so calm. So there is that time and a place when you're hijacked, you know, and I'm a big believer in exercise. And but as you say, it's in context. It's what's relevant to you. It's what you're doing for yourself to resource or help. But it's just such an amazing tool. It really boils my blood, this shite, if you don't mind me swearing, all these memes or memes online, I don't know what you call them, of just coping with anxiety, living with anxiety. We have anxiety, you know, we're in this together. And I just think, no, there's actually a life on the other side of that. If only we could deepen the training and the understanding. The mind wants to keep you away from something difficult that you've already experienced. So sorry, I don't want to shit her on
No,
too much. Excuse my friend.
It's heartbreaking, and it is heartbreaking for
Mm.
me. But then I have a vested interest in saying that stuff because I want people to come and train with me. So then I hold myself back from saying that publicly because it sounds like it's, you know, just buy my spice. But when there's a real truth
I
to it,
know.
you know,
Mm.
there's a real truth to it and a real passion. You know, you have the same passion that I have. You
Yeah.
know, Billy was the instigator behind me training this stuff because she tortured me for after therapy. She tortured me to be my trainer, and she was
During.
what was that,
What
Billy?
did you do? Let's just do there. What
She
did you just
also
do
was the worst
there?
client.
I feel so much better.
She was also the worst client that you could ever have because you could never have
Sorry.
just basic client exchange because she kept saying, well, you would do an intervention and she said, what was that? And then you'd have to explain to her what it was. So you were teaching her and working with her. Sorry, Billy, not to throw you under the bus, but she was a disaster. The work with.
I am sorry. I feel so bad. I looked back originally like, oh, that was a great collaboration. But now on the other side of it, I'm like, oh, poor Shauna. I'd say she was drinking her coffee before I landed in.
I'm only joking. So she was the instigator behind, because it had worked so well and because she had come from a background of, you know, just manage, and because she had come from a background of being a therapist, there was a lot of kind of stars that aligned between our relationship and then her insisting that she's trained, and that started the training academy. The Billy started the training academy that we now have, so you can thank her for this.
Oh.
Thank her for filling your
Wow.
Tuesday nights.
Thank you.
Thank you. So thanks, Billy. Is anybody any questions for Tammy or Billy? Was that helpful, Lee? Did that solidify what we just did? Good, Billy. Thank you. Thanks a million, Darren. Thank you. Okay, Billy is now one of our lead therapists in the company. So and she's clear and trained and APP trained, and she's one of our specialists. So it's lovely to come full circle and then have these conversations, even though I do like throwing her under the bus a wee bit and telling how torturous she is. Joe, the training is, we're opening up the training. I think we're opening up the training tonight. I don't know. We've spaces available in the next training. So the training is October and then February. There's 2 cohorts opened up. So we'll get details of that to come, I'm sure. So yeah, so what's left to say now is maps and patterns become a really important part, and for me inside our work, a pivotal part actually. And as I've said at the beginning, 90% of people will just go straight to maps and patterns. That we don't work in any other interventions. We don't work. Obviously, we're building therapeutic exchange and conscious contract and all of that. We're building therapeutic alliance rather than exchange through the conditions. But we don't tend to wait around for 6 or 8 weeks to see if any of the interventions are kicking in. And cognitively, we just move straight to the body work, because what we find is when we move straight to this process, it builds all of that. It builds everything that I've already said, and it also brings to awareness the core issues, which then gives us a platform for deepening. So on that note, I'm just going to show you the model, and then we'll finish for the night, if that is okay, because I want to show you where we're going tomorrow. There we go. Okay, so I'm just going to share this with you, and then we'll reiterate everything that we've done, and then we'll go from there. And I can't believe that my internet has lasted this long. What do we say? Okay. So what we've effectively done is we've effectively understood all that happens in the therapeutic exchange in terms of anxiety, both in terms of the assessment and what is needed, and in terms of what is often presented. And we've understood that where there's intolerance, where there's any intolerance, we will bounce between intolerance and triggers like that client. And that there's very little therapeutic work because we're bouncing between regulation, tolerance, and if there was another RO out there, we'd be bouncing between resourcing, intolerance triggers, resourcing, intolerance triggers, and you're bouncing around here. That is what exhausts the client. That is what is really difficult. What we have said is that we know that 90% of our clients are showing up with a level of intolerance, and through the assessment we know that there's no capacity for deeper work, so we'll go straight here. Now this, whilst it's body-led work, it also has deep therapeutic exchange on it. It has deep therapeutic work on it. We're working it on shaming, we're working at validation, we're working. So here, whilst it sounds like a very physical body-led work, it's actually not. It incorporates both body and mind. And what we're doing here is that we're building all from the assessment, everything that we need. When we do this and we do it well, we get agency, we build tolerance. So the client doesn't bounce up here anymore. The client will sit between here and understanding the physical symptoms that are coming with much more agency, with much more tolerance, and with much more ability to self-report. Now, then with conscious contract, our client can move here. And what we see is a deepening of the trigger because we've moved a stage of process. The client is now not so much fixated on him, she's fixated on what's creating this in her. She knows from her maps and patterns work that it has something to do with not being lovable, something to do with being rejected, something to do with disconnection. And so she doesn't see, she has begun, and this is really important, and I know it's mind-blowing, but she has begun to separate. She has begun the process of separation. To separate from the people and the places and the things, and to bring herself back to her own inner world. Does that make sense? And in that separation process, we're creating capacity in the mind and capacity in the body to go to a deeper level, consciously contracting. So tomorrow night, we are going to look at the bottom of the triangle. We are also going to speak to part B, which is a really important part of the therapeutic process. But we're going to work in what I call root cause and the deepening process. So how do we move from therapeutic exchange, even with the basic knowledge, how do we move down? How do we step ourselves safely down there, still safely, with all of our tools, with all of our awareness, safely, safely, safely? What does that look like? And we're going to look at shelves of awareness tomorrow. We're going to look at safely moving ourselves towards ourselves and beginning to come home so that we can heal. You're beginning to come home to this material very slowly, very gently, very safely. So that's what we're going to look at tomorrow night. How does that feel, Lise? Is that okay? Good. All right. So if you'll join me tomorrow night for the final big installment, feels like a Netflix drama, although I wouldn't give myself that credit. So let's see you tomorrow, Chan. Was that helpful for you? Was that good? Was it helpful? Just as long as it's helpful. Just as long as you can take some of this material and apply it. Good, good. That's all that matters. I just want you to take the material and make sense of the people sitting in front of you. Brilliance. Okay, yes, good, 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 good. Helpful, helpful, as long as it's helpful. Everything else will come, okay. Yes, you feel inept and vague. You do, you're chasing, it's whack-a-mole. Without a structure for anxiety and understanding what's happening within the human condition, it's whack-a-mole. Good, okay, thank you so much. Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you. I will see you all tomorrow. Hopefully you aren't burnt out. And these are all okay. Well, I'll talk tomorrow. I'll give you some more details on the course and where it starts and how to work. It's all online anyway. Isn't it brilliant? It's great, Kim, to hear other people's stories I can teach to my heart's content, but it's lovely to hear other people's experience of both the program and experience of the work that they've done themselves. That's why it's always lovely to have Billy. Lovely, 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 Thomas. Delighted. I'm delighted it's helpful. Good. Okay, so I'll explain more about how you can work with and become one of our specialists tomorrow night. And if there's any questions in between, you should just send us a link. I think Leona, if you do want to join, will I don't know how many spaces and stuff we have yet, but the link is there anyway for you to begin to have a nosy around joining us, and then I'll explain it more often tomorrow, more in detail tomorrow. All right, my loves, have a lovely evening. See you all. Thank you so much. Thanks for putting up with me, and thanks again. See you all soon. All right, take care. Watch yourselves. Take care. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.